Hello, this is Brian from the Bad Manners Podcast. I'm going to be reacting to a video from A Life After Layoff. I've never reacted to this channel before, so I'm interested to see how this goes. The title of his video is Companies Stopped Hiring Entry-Level Workers. They have no idea what's coming. In some other videos of mine, I've highlighted that not taking on entry-level workers is going to lead to a long-term problem with the domestic labor force, where there is no opportunity for people to grow into those roles and become the new experts, which will lead over time to the collapse of established business models. But I am genuinely curious to see if this is where his train of thought goes, or if he has a different answer altogether. Let's get into it.
Companies across the country have spent the last 3 years cutting entry-level positions, eliminating middle management layers, and telling themselves that they're being efficient. And they are, right now. But I've been paying attention to the hiring cycle since the early 2000s, and what I'm watching unfold right now is one of the most short-sighted workforce decisions I've ever seen in my entire career. I surmise that in 5 years, a lot of these companies are going to look up and realize they have nobody left to lead. The pipeline completely gone. Their bench is completely empty. And the ironic part is they did it all to themselves.
It appears that he's in the same general train of thought that I'm in, so this is already a great start, and I'm excited to see what he has for this.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Brian. I'm the founder of A Life After Layoff, a career strategist and a corporate recruiter, and I've made it my mission to demystify how careers and job search work at major corporations. So if this kind of content interests you, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you're tired of employers holding all the cards in the employment arrangement, including these companies who are eliminating middle managers and not hiring entry-level people, then it's time for you to reclaim control in your career, unless you want them to continue jerking you around into perpetuality. And if you're not sure how to do that, I've actually created a free 1.5-hour webinar which walks you through the exact steps you need to take right now in order to start reclaiming control and become the CEO of your career. So if you're in an active job search, or you're somebody that is disenfranchised by where their career is going and wants something bigger and better, check out that free webinar. I'll leave a link in the video description below. So let me give you a full picture, because I don't think this is just a feeling that I have, and I'm sure a lot of you share as well. The pattern is real, and it's playing out across a lot of different industries right now. Fact of the matter is that entry-level hiring has dropped significantly across most white-collar industries since 2022. Conveniently, companies blame the pandemic and then the economy and couldn't wait to lay people off. Then they blamed AI. Then they blamed productivity. But the real reason in most cases is much simpler than that. The painful truth, and I think we need to be objective here, is that entry-level workers are expensive to train, slow to produce, and easy to cut when the CFO needs to show the board that they have a cleaner headcount number. So they replace their work with AI tools, offshore contractors, and piled extra responsibilities onto the poor mid-level employees who were already stretched thin to begin with.
It's one of the reasons that I think the data point I saw recently was 9 out of 10 jobs here in the U.S. have been filled, or in like the last 5 years have been filled by foreign workers. Essentially what they're doing is they're jettisoning the lower level jobs, so the entry level things, and they're replacing with people that are supposed to be more skilled and capable from these other countries. And you would think in theory this would be some kind of brain drain where we're, benefiting from taking these superior workers from other places. But all we're really doing is impoverishing our younger generations because they're not getting these opportunities. And he's absolutely correct. Taking on somebody who perhaps only has whatever skills were given to them through college and whatever very limited opportunity to practice those skills they've gained up to that point, there's going to be some mistakes, there's going to be some growing pains, but that's supposed to be a part of the normal developmental cycle. If you look at a person's whatever trade they apply in the workforce, it's almost like an entire life cycle in its own right. So much as an adult went through the growing pains associated with childhood, beginning a career, those growing pains are going to make things more difficult. And yeah, it's not ideal for businesses to deal with somebody going through those growing pains, but obviously a parent would find it far easier if a child came out already skilled. Much like with most things in life, everything has a kind of cyclical nature to it, and corporations in particular have been trying to circumvent that cycle for short-term gain.
And to shareholders on the quarterly earnings calls, these senior leaders can get up there and say that they're being very disciplined and that they're being proactive with cost cutting. And let's face it, they probably look at them as smart leadership or smart management teams. That that's what they're supposed to be doing. But I suspect that we are witnessing a real talent crisis unfolding over the next few years. And I have to wonder if these efficiency gains that they're pitching to analysts and the shareholders are actually going to be worth it in the long run, because they didn't just stop at entry level. It goes a lot deeper than that. You see, while companies were busy cutting entry level roles, they were also flattening their organizations, eliminating middle manager jobs primarily. But what they were doing is reducing the number of decision makers between frontline and the senior leadership team. And they pitched this as a way for companies to be more agile, to make decisions quicker, to push down the decision making to the people who are actually impacted by the work. So companies like Meta made this a very public strategy, and a lot of companies followed suit. Fewer managers, flatter structure, more efficiency. In reality, cheaper costs. And look, even though I was a mid manager myself, I understand the logic. Layers of management do slow things down. Too many approvals. You have too many meetings that are scheduled, too much bureaucracy. I get it. But here's what happens when you actually flatten these organizations. You eliminate the roles where people learn to lead. You eliminate career paths. You eliminate an entire layer that you have to go through and pay your dues in order to move into the upper levels of these organizations. And trust me when I say this, middle management is not glamorous. You get beat up from both ends, but it's where people learn how to make decisions with real consequences and how to manage teams, how to manage difficult situations, how to build these teams and navigate organizational dynamics. This is probably the first time where politics becomes a real thing, and how to develop the kind of judgment that eventually qualifies somebody for a senior level position. So it's a necessary layer, and they basically cut it across the board. So,
You know, he actually brought a fascinating perspective there. Most people that aren't involved in this, clearly he was involved in this. I actually must attest that I haven't, because I've always, either done trades related things or something to that effect, or I'm a teacher now. And teachers are kind of the low man on the totem pole anyway. So he mentions that it is a stepping stone in terms of the development of somebody, and I hadn't actually considered that it's part of a general upward trajectory that allows for skills acquisitions at each step. I had looked at it simply from the efficiency standpoint as somebody looking at it from the outside in. But it makes absolute sense. So despite the inefficiencies it produces, it does develop human capital. And that does give it value. Because I would be a hypocrite if I would endorse, policies and a belief that you need to take on, entry-level workers so that you can in turn make them skilled and increase their human capital, but not allow similar opportunities for people also further up the chain. So, already, please like, comment, subscribe to his work. I think he's got a fantastic read on the ins and outs of this issue already.
when you are cutting these roles and making them so rare that nobody can realistically grow into them, you're not just changing the organizational chart. In my opinion, you're removing a training ground, a necessary layer that was supposed to produce the next generation of leaders, to give them a chance to show their goods, to develop, to get that mentoring, to make some of the critical mistakes that they may need to make before they get into these senior level roles. So now you have entry level workers who, coming out of school, just cannot get hired at all. And you have mid-level managers with nowhere to go. And the senior level roles that inevitably become open in these organizations, well, they keep on getting filled from the outside because there's nobody inside who's developed enough to step into them. And I have to wonder if anybody at the top has actually thought this through, or if the next earning call is just too close to worry about something that's going to happen 5 years from now. It's like,
I don't think it's so much an issue of whether they've thought it through or not. I think it has a lot to do with a systemic issue in the United States. Corporations are legally obligated to maximize shareholder return. They have to work towards that next profits quarters. If it were a business environment where, this is a privately owned business, they would have the luxury of being able to be less efficient. They wouldn't have the duty to increase shareholder dividends. And I've talked about it in other videos. It's one of the reasons that I believe that By moving to a publicly owned model instead of a privately owned model, you've turned corporations into their own special version of the tragedy of the commons. There is no longer that direct human investment into the community or the population that they service, and instead it just simply becomes a matter of accounting. So CEOs are not really in a position to be able to entertain that thought to begin with. Everything has to be short term. Also, that's another advantage to, of course, purely privately owned businesses. They can do long term planning. They can risk short term loss for long term gain. So I think in order for that issue to be meaningfully addressed, you actually have to look at the entire legal structuring that surrounds corporations, because it's created what amounts to perverse incentives in the form of, what we're seeing now with entry-level jobs not being as readily available.
Out of sight, out of mind, we'll worry about that when we get to it. So when I look at the entry-level job market and how broken it truly is right now, I think a lot of senior leaders have genuinely lost sight of what the entry-level hiring is actually for. It was never about just getting junior tasks done at a lower cost or fetching somebody coffee. It was really meant to be kind of like in a baseball analogy, the farm system. Young folks were supposed to get into these roles, learn and develop over the course of a couple of years, move into the more senior and advanced positions at the individual contributor level, and then there was supposed to be a separation. There was going to be a certain group that would move into leadership type of roles, and then there was another group that would go more technical. And that's just how the workplace worked. And for those who did get tapped on the shoulder or split off onto that very purposeful decision to move into leadership, this was a place for them, the future managers, the directors, and the VPs, to learn the fundamentals of business and how things operate and how the political climate works before they were given actual real responsibilities. And think about how this actually works in a healthy organization, which admittedly is becoming fewer and farther between. Somebody comes into the entry-level role, they learn the systems, the culture, the customers, the products. They maybe sit beside somebody who's much more senior than them, and they learn the process. They get deep level knowledge that you can't just train people on. So they're making small mistakes. That's just part of the job, but they're making them in fairly low stakes situations where somebody can kind of help them clean up their messes. But ultimately, they're getting mentored. And then certain of them are getting promoted. And by the time they're managing people, maybe 5-7 years into their career, maybe making decisions that affect the business on some level of scale. And they've now spent 5, 7, 10 years building a real foundation. But that process takes time. You can't shortcut it. You can't just send them to a training course and expect them to have all of this stuff. There is value in the experience or the school of hard knocks. But companies have been dismantling both ends of it at the same time. No entry level coming at the bottom, and no middle management layer to develop them through. And the whole system depends on both pieces being there and being there right now for one another.
He's obviously absolutely correct. Earlier I compared it to a kind of cycle. When you're entering any skilled position or entering any line of entry level position at a company, you're effectively a child all over again. You don't have the knowledge needed to capably interact with that environment to such an extent that you are an expert. It's just not the case. And developing that human capital is naturally going to take a considerable amount of time. Effectively, it's been transformed from a process that this was at least intuitively understand as an organic, lifelong process. Humans simply continuing to learn and develop through over the course of your life. And the way corporations and businesses are functioning now, the intuitive understanding of it being this kind of organic cyclical process has been effectively dismissed. Almost a belief that it's not necessary. Because obviously if you believe it's necessary, you would have never gotten away from it in the first place. And I really truly believe, while he hasn't emphasized it, this belief has been allowed to take root heavily because of the presence of an ability to hire foreign workers. And there is at least some belief, and you even see it reflected in statements by the President of the United States, where he believes that there's simply jobs United States citizens cannot do. Well, if there's this belief in the, supposed superiority of foreign labor to perform certain tasks, then you can just continue to swap those cogs in and out of the businesses with, it is to be assumed, no real loss in the process. So not only have they, flattened middle management, as he referred to, which, kneecaps any potential leadership growth to an extent, and they've made entry-level jobs harder to come by, they've really taken the notion of people being interchangeable economic units to its extreme, and they can just swap it for any foreigner and everything's just fine.
Now, this is where I think things get genuinely interesting, and by interesting, I mean genuinely concerning. In 5 years, a meaningful portion of today's senior managers and directors are going to be stepping into VP roles, whether at that company or leaving for other companies or stepping back altogether. And the organizations that have cut their entry-level pipeline and then hollowed out their middle management are going to be looking and saying, okay, well, who's ready to step up? The bench is going to be thin, really thin, because the people who should have been developing in those roles over the last 3 to 5 years were either never hired, were laid off before they could ever get any real experience, or left because they were blocked or couldn't see a path forward, especially when all these companies are laying off all these layers. And the really good ones are going to look around and say, I'm not sticking around for this. And here's the part that I have noticed, and it is genuinely frustrating because it's so short-sighted and it impacts what used to be a healthy job market. The executives making these workforce decisions are largely optimizing for the next quarter, the next earnings call. Let's face it, the next slide deck that they have to put together and deliver to the board meeting next month. And a lot of them, they're not even going to be at the company when the consequences actually start to rear their ugly heads. Because these senior leaders, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, you should pay really close attention. They all seem to move around. I've seen senior leaders come into organizations that I used to work for. They come in, blow the place up, make wholesale changes, collect a massive bonus, and then they have a golden parachute and they land off somewhere in safety. To me, it's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do. And if you actually
This is effectively a fantastic argument against the publicly owned or business models. If this was a privately owned business where the owner was going to end up staying no matter what, the investment in that process becomes considerably different. The consequence of blowing up that business would have far more meaning to that individual. If a person is just coming in as sort of a temporary mercenary, and it doesn't really matter what wreckage is left in their wake, then the incentive to make sure that you protect and preserve that institution is missing. It's one of the reasons, looking at this in a governmental perspective, that China has this approach that, they're working on long-term goals, and they understand that America does some kind of significant change every 4 to 8 years, and it might cause them to have to be moderate their positions a little bit temporarily, but in the big picture, they understand it'll get back to business as usual eventually. Or you have an American president that might aggressively pursue certain priorities during his 4 years, and if those 4 years are disastrous, there's no real actual penalty for having left behind a horrible legacy. I am no monarchist, but this is actually one of the reasons that people argue in favor of monarchism is in our kind of constitutional republic system. There's no real consequence if you fail other than you get voted out. Your life still goes on just fine. Whereas for a monarchy, an angry populace knows exactly who to blame, and if they overthrow you, of course, your bloodline's position of power ceases to exist. So, all of this just gives me a stronger belief in having a system strongly structured around private ownership of business. You can still have a stock market, offer stocks, buy stocks, invest in companies, but the duty of a company to have to pursue dividends for shareholders, that should actually be abolished. It directly interferes with long-term financial planning, so it turns businesses' goals into a constant pursuit of short-term gain. And it can promote policies within that short-term gain that will dismantle the business gradually over time. And finally, because there's no private owner, who really cares if that business fails? CEOs and the like get golden parachutes. But continuing on.
Paid attention to the most senior levels of these organizations and how they move from company to company to company, we would be considered job hoppers if we did that. In fact, we are considered job hoppers when we do that. We're judged and we're ridiculed and we're rejected and we're basically made to feel like we're not loyal, that we don't have the ability to see things through, that we bounce out at the first moment of there being trouble. These are all the things that interviewers love to ask employees questions on, but they can do it without any problem. They talk about long-term thinking while making very short-term decisions. And the people, unfortunately, who end up having to pay the price for it are the mid-level employees who stay too loyal and the early career workers who just want to get a start on their career but can't even get a foot in the door. And honestly, it's going to be the shareholders who eventually are left holding the bag when these companies are hollowed out and have no ability to continue to operate at the same level of efficiency. Then it starts to look like private equity, where suddenly they're just coming in with an independent leadership team who has no attachment to that business and is making decisions that are only for profitability first and foremost. And honestly, shareholders should be asking that very direct question right now and not simply just how much profitability did you achieve in this last quarter. If you've eliminated your entry-level pipeline and you've cut your middle management layer, who's going to run the company in 10 years? Because unless the answer is, well, we plan on AI running everything, that's a question that really needs an answer.
I truly believe that their answer to this is that they will just hire a foreigner of some kind of skill and expertise from a foreign business to come and run that domestic business, because the human capital of the domestic population will be entirely missing because they never gain the opportunity to actually develop their human capital. You need those entry-level jobs, and as he made me aware, and I'm very appreciative, even that middle management bureaucracy serves a purpose in the development of human capital. It's absolutely vital to ensure that the future generations are able to walk through that process so that they can become the future leaders. But we are absolutely at a stage where there is a common belief among many that you can simply swap one human for another into the same position, and that we are just these interchangeable cogs. It is kind of the end result of, well, globalist ideology. All humans are roughly the same, therefore they can be exchangeable.
Which brings me to the AI argument, because this is the justification I hear most often when we read into this. Companies are telling us that AI will do a lot of what entry-level workers used to do. And for certain tasks, let's face it, that's probably true. Routine data work, basic research, first drafts. AI is well equipped to handle all of that kind of work. It's honestly well equipped to handle what most entry-level roles are doing. But AI doesn't build organizational judgment. It doesn't build the bench strength. It doesn't develop client relationships. It can't navigate internal politics. It can't advocate for the team, or it can't make the kind of contextual decisions that experienced leaders make every single day. And those things come from years of work that cannot be replaced by simple automation or shipping roles overseas. You have to actually be there. You actually have to do the work. You have to actually be a part of the mistakes for specific organizations with specific people working on specific problems. You have to experience all that stuff because that's how you get developed. And we've already seen a version of this play out. Companies firing thousands of people and replacing them with AI. Well, a lot of them are realizing kind of the hard way that AI couldn't do what the people that they laid off could. The work got worse, it's got sloppier, and it literally directly impacted their bottom line, and their customers noticed. And there's a result to that. To me,
so he's mentioning the AI thing. I have a background as a chess player. Chess players have been using databases for an extraordinarily long time, and we've been using chess engines, which is kind of like a proto version of AI in its own way. Chess engines, since at least the late 90s, definitely by the 2000s, they were stronger and more capable in a game of chess than any individual human. However, humans knew full well that chess engines by themselves would make mistakes. Now, a human might not be able to exploit those mistakes in an individual game of chess because humans make more mistakes. But what they found is you could produce an extraordinarily high level of chess play if you combine human ability with the chess engine's ability. And it was in that synergy, often called centaur chess, man and machine, that you really pulled out the best in both. And it is my firm belief that that is the primary purpose AI is going to serve in the workforce. It will greatly enhance the productivity of humans that know what they're doing, but the human, due to their established expertise base and their thorough knowledge of what is and isn't correct within the domains of whatever skill they're exercising, that can help for those outlier cases where the AI would perhaps go astray. So effectively, anybody with a chess background has some awareness that that's going to be the way it goes. The only exception to this is if you somehow achieve actual AGI, and then you have to assume that every decision the AGI makes is going to be correct. But that also assumes whatever data it's being fed is actually reliable, which is a different issue, because it's not like that AGI is going to be directly interacting with all aspects of the environment. But that's a different topic regardless. The bottom line is, anybody that thinks that AI is going to be the one running their business, it's not going to be successful. It's going to have to be in tandem with a highly skilled human as well. And to some extent, that will possibly filter down to lower skilled levels of business too. Will it eliminate some jobs? Yes, because things will get more efficient, but it will not negate the need for human expertise.
This is the same mistake. It's just a longer timeline on the horizon. And to me, this is going to be a much more expensive and difficult one to walk back. Now, if you're a mid-level manager or a senior individual contributor, pay attention to whether your company is investing in the entry-level hiring, in the management development portion. Do they have development programs for new people coming into the organization who can develop into the next tier of leadership? Do they have leadership development programs for people who are already in those companies in these roles? Because a company that stopped growing their pipeline is usually a company that stopped thinking about its people on almost every single level. I've just seen it consistently across the board. And honestly, that's the same thinking that tends to impact promotions, compensation, retention, all of these things that we used to rely on as part of a successful and healthy career. That's becoming much more rare. And if you're early in your career and you're struggling to find that first real role, this is a big part of why. It's not that companies decided your generation wasn't worth investing in or that you weren't capable, that they made a financial calculation that junior talent was the cost that they were willing to take and push off. The problem is that you can't push it off into the future forever, and there are going to be companies who figure this out and actually do something about it, and there's going to be other companies, potentially their competitors, who are going to be headfirst into laying everybody off and replacing them with AI and getting rid of their middle management layers, and they're going to realize that they've made a huge mistake, and the first company is going to take advantage. And the ones who aren't paying attention to this are going to have a very predictable crisis on their hands, and they only have themselves to blame. Now, if you're in middle management trying to figure out what's next for you after being laid off and wondering if there's still a career path for you, or you're somebody who's entry level and is just trying to get your foot in the door somewhere, it's actually something that I specialize in. I've got a website called Life After Layoff, which is loaded with tips, tricks, and insider frameworks from a recruiter's perspective. And I teach my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of training courses, everything from resume writing from a recruiter's perspective through resume rocket fuel, through an entire job search process broken down as if I was looking for my own job, and also how to operate your career strategy, because you need strategy more now than we've ever needed it before. The market's changing too rapidly, and I've created a very detailed course on how to deal with the strategy piece of it through your entirety of your career. It's called the Ultimate Career Blueprint, and I highly recommend that as kind of a core course for anybody who wants to have a successful career.
I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. You have no idea how happy it makes me, intellectually happy that is, to hear a person talking about this particular component of the issue, because I've been concerned about the halt of the development of human capital in the United States for a while. And one should be deeply distressed about the lack of human capital being developed in the United States, because obviously we're a country that used to be able to accomplish practically anything. But now we're at such a state where you've got the President of the United States making it very clear that he believes there's things that Americans simply cannot do and that you need foreign labor for. And that is a scathing indictment of the rules governing the economic system that we're operating within. I mentioned previously in the video, corporations, the way they structure or the laws that affect the way they're structured or the behaviors that you can expect of them because of pre-existing laws, those need to change. You have to do away with the legal obligation to pursue the financial interests of your shareholders. It has to disappear. I understand why it was created, but we are beginning to see the consequences, and this is an unintended consequence of needing to pursue short-term gain all the time. But when it becomes clear that those unintended consequences outweigh the interests of the alternative, you need to go back to a model where they're absolved of that duty. This would free them up to begin allowing for long-term planning. And if they're allowed to plan for the long term, then there's more of an incentive to invest in entry-level workers, to expand middle management so that you can develop new leaders. So yes, would it cause business costs to be relatively higher? Undoubtedly. But it would better promote the development of human capital in the United States, which would in turn benefit the business in the long run. In my political videos, I often make the point that when the Founding Fathers founded the United States, they founded it for themselves and their posterity. So any planning you do for a structure or a system in the United States doesn't need to just promote for what we can get for ourselves now. We need to be promoting plans that makes the world better for those that come after us, even if it means we do not maximally benefit ourselves in the short term. It is my firm belief that that is how you produce a healthy, prosperous civilization, where each generation is looking after the next. Other than that, though, this was a fantastic video. I don't know how many more videos of his I'll react to because, I tend to do more political stuff. But this is an important issue. People need to become aware of this, and they need to start pushing for policies that can actually begin to address this problem. But I truly believe that this problem is coming more from the legislative side and the legal side than it necessarily is from the corporations themselves. Because if there was a requirement that these corporations, rather than being this current model, but they had to stay privately owned, you would already see substantial shifts in terms of how business is conducted. This is what I call the solution to the banality of evil idea. Other than that, that's all I have to say on this topic. If you liked anything I had to say, like, comment, subscribe. If you didn't like anything I said, or you have a disagreement with me, you can post a comment. I will discuss it with you. Have a good day.